think, you see, it's about time somebody says it. It's the elephant in the room. Look around. We are just formalizing what is actually happening. People are taking off their masks. Are you catching? So now the DILG says the police will now apprehend.
We end the week with Cebu Governor Gwendolyn Garcia standing firm on her call to make face masks optional, as this has been the reality on the ground, she says. Reports have shown that some residents in Cebu City have gone maskless even in crowded outdoor settings.
The Interior Department, however, rejected Garcia's maskless mandate, saying President Rodrigo Duterte has instructed the agency to keep enforcing the protocols of the IATF. Interior Secretary Eduardo Año says police officers will continue to arrest violators of the IATF guidelines, even Cebuanos. Time for today's biggest headlines. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Cebu Governor Gwendolyn Garcia is standing by her order to make wearing of face masks optional in her province, despite warnings from the Interior Department.
Health officials in her region, however, have no contention with the policy. Even a think tank believes the order is reasonable. Jem Avancenia with The Big Story.
Less than 24 hours after Cebu Governor Gwendolyn Garcia issued an executive order making the wearing of masks optional, some Cebuanos in the downtown area are already enjoying the outdoors maskless, even in crowded places. But some are not letting their guards down just yet.
Hindi pa rin dapat magpakampante kasi ang daming tao rito. Hindi maiwasang may bumahin. Paikot-ikot lang ang virus. For safety pa rin talaga. Yung pinapatupad ni Governor na pag open air, pwedeng walang mask. Siguro dadami ang foreign tourist. Malaking tulong sa amin kapag may mga turista.
In Governor Garcia's order, only those with symptoms and those in closed and air-conditioned spaces will be required to wear face masks. But the Interior Department is rejecting Garcia's order, citing that the country still implements IATF guidelines, including the wearing of masks. In a statement, the DILG said the police may even arrest violators in Cebu, but Garcia is standing by her directive.
Self-anointed authorities enjoyed such dictatorial tendencies will finally realize that people are sick and tired of all of these restrictions that have reached a point of ridiculousness and idiocy.
Health officials from Region 7 are backing the provincial government's order. Even the Octa Research Group thinks this is a reasonable move.
Reasonable within the context na mababa yung cases sa Cebu. Even right now, we're not seeing an uptick yet sa Cebu. The outdoors naman yung hindi mandatory. Even sa mga ibang areas, even dito sa SCR locally, pag nasa outdoors ako, parang mga hindi masyadong susot ang face mask or hindi maayos yung pagkasot ng face mask.
But as for Cebu City Mayor Mike Rama, they would still have to consult with other agencies before completely adapting the policy. For News 5, Jem Avancenia, we are One News.
Is Cebu ready to go maskless? We crunch the numbers with Octa Research Fellow Professor Guido David. Professor David, welcome to The Big Story.
Hi, good evening, Robbie and Gretchen.
Professor, sabi nyo nga, reasonable to given that one, it's for outdoors and two, mababa naman ang numbers sa Cebu. Let me check the counter scenario for that. What would make it unreasonable?
Well, obviously, if the cases are increasing, then, of course, this is a policy decision by the national government and the local government. But what we're saying is, if cases are increasing, then there should be some discussion on recalibrating yung mga measures. In the same way, when cases are increasing, tayo, in the NCR, sometimes we move to alert level 2 if the cases are high. So, kumbaga, adding restrictions would be the same as requiring face masks.
Now, it was different scenarios and details back then, but this is not the first time that Cebu and Governor Garcia has, gone a different direction from the national directions and mandates. Were there any repercussions, and were there any indicators that, before when they made those different decisions that they took a hit?
Well, I don't recall. I mean, each area is different. Each province is different, and I think they probably take more liberties because Cebu doesn't really affect other provinces. I think this was mentioned to me by someone today, a reporter. I forgot who, pero they were saying na, for example, a similar measure or policy in the NCR would have different repercussions because NCR is surrounded by Cavite, Calabarzon, and Central Luzon. So NCR affects other regions. On the other hand, Cebu is, it's basically by itself, so it doesn't really interact directly with other neighboring provinces. So that's what I'm just saying is that each province, maybe each LG has a unique position, and they're better able to evaluate their own interventions that time with the assistance of the national government. Pero that being said, I actually can't recall if there were effects ng previous changes nila sa policy.
In any case, Professor David, time will tell how long before we see the results of this policy in Cebu.
Definitely, and I hope as it's always the case, when we have policy recommendations, when there are policy recommendations, there should usually be measures then in place in case there will need to be a recalibration. Kumbaga, what would be the trigger for reverting back just in case there's a need? So yung sinabi mo kanina, it ties into with being unreasonable. Ibig sabihin, what events will be needed to trigger reversal of these policy recommendations?
Okay, maraming salamat po. That was Octa Research Fellow Professor Guido David. As we said, this is not the first time that the Cebu local government is challenging COVID-19 protocols. Gretchen gives us a rundown on some of these disagreements in the past. Gretchen?
Well, Robbie, on several occasions, the Cebu government clashed with national government on some of its proposals which went against the IATF's mandate. Back in May 2021, Cebu issued an executive order stating that returning overseas Filipinos will immediately have themselves swab tested after landing in Cebu. This went against IATF's policy that swab testing should be done on the 7th day of quarantine due to the incubation period of COVID-19. Another issue came when Cebu said arrivals will only go through a 2-day quarantine. Even if the person tested positive for COVID-19, they are allowed to undergo home monitoring. This is in stark contrast to the 10-day quarantine established by the IATF to prevent the spread of the Delta variant. Meanwhile, in early January this year, Governor Garcia opposed the no vaccine, no ride policy implemented by IATF on all public vehicles. Garcia cited RA 11525 or the COVID vaccination law. The law states that vaccination cards cannot be made a requirement for anyone to avail education, employment, or government services. And in February, Cebu allowed unvaccinated foreigners to visit the province. They are only required to have a negative RT-PCR test 2 days before departure and a swab test upon landing and 5 days after. Now, under IATF guidelines, foreign tourists are only allowed if they have been vaccinated. These are the other big stories tonight. An envoy of the United Nations has met with President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and said the incoming leader has committed to high-level accountability on human rights issues. Meralco is set to raise power rates this month. Households could see an 80 peso increase in their electricity bills. And K-pop sensation BTS dropped their much-awaited anthology, Proof, complete with their greatest hits and unreleased songs. More of these big stories after the break.
Yeah, the past was honestly the best. My best is what comes next. Never see anything more. Good night.
watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ends his week yet again with another set of courtesy visits, this time from a number of European and English ambassadors and a UN representative.
Human rights figured heavily in some of those visits. Let's get more details with mobile journalist Julie Baiza reporting to us live from Mandaluyong. Julie, first off, incoming President Marcos Jr. met with UN Representative Gustavo Gonzales. Did they talk about him attending the UN General Assembly, and basically what were the key takeaways from their discussion, especially on human rights?
Robbie, Marcos is yet to confirm his attendance on the scheduled AMBA this September. Although according to his camp, he expressed that it would be very important to attend the event and meet with other world leaders. Aside from the preparations on the AMBA, Marcos and Gonzales discussed the importance of sustaining the peace in the Bangsamoro region. There was also a discussion on climate crisis, given the fact that the Philippines is number 4 in terms of risk caused by climate change. And lastly, issues on human rights, where Marcos raised the importance of ensuring high level of accountability.
He mentioned also the importance of ensuring high level of accountability in terms of the human rights. And we also referred to the October session of the Human Rights Council, where the new administration will be ready for a successful session.
Julie, I believe Marcos Jr. also met with the Swedish ambassador, where the war on drugs was touched. What were the salient points of that discussion, and are they supporting calls for the extension of the anti-drug campaign?
Right, Gretchen, Marcos and Thunberg touched upon the issue of war on drugs in the Philippines. Thunberg said that Marcos expressed a strong commitment to continue the war on drugs within the framework of law and with respect for human rights. The drug war campaign will focus on rehabilitation and socio-economic development. She mentioned it is much appreciated on their side, and they are looking forward for close collaboration on this matter.
Julie, aside from the UN representatives, the U.S. envoy also paid a courtesy visit to incoming President Marcos on Thursday. Was the matter of whether or not he will visit the United States discussed?
Robbie, Marcos and some of his advisors met Marcos and some of his advisors met with Sherman yesterday, where they agreed on the importance of partnering together to strengthen economy. Sherman also highlighted the importance of alliance between the two countries in ensuring the security and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region, and also the importance of fostering respect for human rights and rule of law. It is not clear if Marcos and Sherman discuss whether or not he will be able to visit the U.S., but in a separate discussion, Sherman pointed out that Marcos would be welcome to the United States given his diplomatic immunity as a head of state.
Okay, maraming salamat. That was mobile journalist Julie Baiza reporting to us live from Mandaluyong. Meanwhile, incoming Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan says his goal is to ensure high-level growth at 6 to 8% GDP all throughout the next administration.
He says this will allow the generation of more quality jobs and bring down poverty level to single digit. To do this, the returning NETA Secretary tells 1PH that global supply shocks, including high prices of energy and food, should be addressed immediately. While acknowledging the struggles of farmers, he says it's unlikely for the rice tariffication law to be amended. He is also confident that the economy can outgrow its pandemic-induced debt. National debt has reached record levels of nearly 13 trillion pesos.
Given the other appointments made by our president, I think that we could work together as a team. I would like to believe that's an incredible team. So, especially at the economic team, I've worked with many of these people, with most of them in the past. So I'm quite confident that we'll get our acts together and move the economy.
Cause I just wanna see the next.
Arby's K-pop superstars BTS is back. RM, Jin, Suga, J-Hope, Jimin, V, and Jungkook have finally dropped their highly anticipated album, Proof. But not only that, their music video for the newest single yet to come is also up. And in its first 4 hours of release, the MV has already garnered almost 18 million views. It is also trending #1 on YouTube for music. The 3-disc album is an anthology featuring the group's biggest hits and most memorable songs throughout their career. Back bigger than ever, the 7-member group will be celebrating their 9th debut anniversary on June 13 through an online live show where they will perform their newest single, The Best Is Indeed Yet to Come. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Another quick break, more of the big stories when we return.
Still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. It's Friday. For some, a day to finally start the weekend. But for most Metro Manila commuters, this means facing an exhausting commute home.
Some good news to look forward to. The Asian Development Bank has approved the $44.3 billion loan for the South Commuter Railway Project. Marian Enriquez with this report.
Metro Manila commuters are well aware of the hassle that comes with commuting in the city. But Friday nights are especially grueling as everyone rushes to get home for the weekend. 59-year-old Edgardo falls in line at the EDSA Ayala bus stop every day. He's lucky if he gets to Laguna by 10 p.m. But more often than not, it takes him until midnight.
Wala kaming alternative transportation na ayon sa schedule namin. Kung ano lang yung available sa natin. Public transport. Yun lang.
The same tiring scenario welcomes 29-year-old Carl as he is now required to report to office twice a week.
Dati pag umuwi kami to Balibago, may FX doon na pinipila. Ngayon nandito lahat, naghalo-halo yung bus. So sobrang siksikan, tapos hindi pa nga tapos yung pandemic.
With work settings slowly reverting back to normal, commuters like Edgardo and Carl are hopeful that the next administration can fix the country's public transportation system.
Nag-unti-unti na pinapapasok yung mga empleyado, unti-unti na binubuksan yung ekonomiya. So kung gusto nilang lalong buksan yung ekonomiya, pagtrabahuin yung mga tao, sana maging priority nila to.
Starting June 14, a no-card, no-ride policy will be implemented at the EDSA Ayala bus stop, and commuters will have to avail the TripCo card. The card is free and only requires commuters to present a valid ID, but they have to avail an initial load of 50 to 100 pesos. Meanwhile, the Asian Development Bank has approved a $4.3 billion loan for the 54.6 kilometer South Commuter Railway project. Part of the North-South Commuter Railway network, this line will connect Metro Manila to Calamba City, Laguna, and aims to reduce travel time by over half from the current 2.5 hours on road. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
No reprieve yet in sight, even for electricity bills, as Meralco announces a power rate hike. Tonight's big number is 80 pesos. That's the total increase that households which consume 200 kilowatt hours should expect on the electric bill this month. Overall power rate in June has increased to almost 40 centavos per kilowatt hour. Meralco says this is due to higher power generation costs as fuel prices continue to rise.
Meanwhile, Asia is set to have its first ever Center for Exorcism.
This as a church plans to establish one in Makati following the rise of numbers in Filipinos being possessed this pandemic. Mobile journalist Cesar Cacnio has the story.
By this sign of the Holy Cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit.
It might seem like limited to the movies, but exorcisms do happen more often than we think in real life, minus the head spinning. Having nightmares, waking up with bruises, hearing voices, and seeing shadows, these are common signs of demonic possession. According to Manila Archdiocese Director and Chief Exorcist, Father Francisco Siquia, and the number of possessions among Filipinos since the pandemic, he say, is no joke with no less than 10 cases daily. This is why they are planning to establish a center for exorcism in Makati. First in the country and even in Asia. It will be called St. Michael Center for Spiritual Liberation and Exorcism.
We need a permanent site kung saan mag-pray over. Kasi pag may mga emergencies, hindi lang basa-basa. It has to be a sacred place. Also, we have a training center to form exorcists. Also, a center wherein we can interview more cases.
But how do demonic infestations happen?
Nagkakaroon siya ng mga tinatawag nating mga openings. Binubuksan niya iba't ibang pintuan sa buhay niya that allows the demon to enter. Okay? Like for example, of course, alam natin yung kasalanan, no? A person who is really into an evil sinful lifestyle.
Aside from people, though, demons can also possess personal things such as clothes, handkerchiefs, and even toys. Feeling unlucky these days, that might just also be the work of a demon. Siquia said to turn the entity away, a prayer and other religious items blessed by the church are needed. The Center of Exorcism is expected to be operational by next year. The Archdiocese of Manila will also be raising funds for its construction. Mobile journalist Cesar Cacnio, we are One News.
Natakot ako.
Nagagawin ka na sa weekend?
Anong gagawin ko?
Bumisita ka doon, magpa-check up lang.
Grabe ka. Ibang adventure ang gusto ko. Grabe ka naman. Ang sama nito.
Check up lang naman di ba? Siguraduhin mo lang, di ba? Siguraduhin mo lang na sa panlabas, panloob, maayos lahat, di ba?
Teka, oo nga, no? Pagka mabait, yun yung madalas na poposes.
Check up lang.
Mga mababait, katulad ko.
May mga kilala ako, nasa meeting, sa Zoom meeting, pagka tinawag na, nagbabago boses, nagiging choppy, tapos biglang nawawala.
Kaya pala. Oo. Pero pagdadasal natin yung mga nandun. Huwag kang mag-alala, baka madayo nga ako dyan. Well, happy weekend. That wraps up today's Big Story. Catch us again Monday at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Gresham Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.